I just wanted to take a minute and talk about fantasy life. It was an aspect to the club that I ran in college, the BDSM club, where a lot of times people that came in who were new, who were curious, would speak about having bad thoughts, to put it generally. The example that always comes to mind was this one girl who came in and she had the experience as a child of being disciplined by her, I believe her mother, could have been her father, with the back of a brush. She'd be spanked with a brush. And even though this was, a negative punishment for her as a child, as the years went on, she found herself being turned on by the idea of being spanked and, most especially, being spanked with a brush. Now, of course, these two ideas kind of are in conflict with one another. Something that was supposed to be punishment, something that should have a negative connotation to you, shouldn't also make you happy after a fashion. And it was this disparity that caused her to think that something was wrong with her. She was raised to believe, at least instinctually, that this activity was a bad thing, that this was a negative thing. This was a negative event. Why would a negative event, something that's bad, make me feel good? Therefore, something's wrong with me. And that sort of encapsulates a lot of the concerns I think people have when it comes to having quote-unquote unclean thoughts, whether it has to do with an individual or an activity or whatever in a sexual fashion, or something that turns you on. Now, I'm not a psychologist, okay? This is not advice that I am giving. If you have issues that you need to deal with, you definitely should see someone or talk to someone who is more trained than I am. But, in general, I can speak from my own experience that if something makes you happy in your mind, it's not bad. If you have a dirty thought about someone, or a place, or an activity, and it makes you happy, you don't have to feel guilty over that thought making you happy. Now, I'm not talking about taking horrible things that might make you evilly happy in your mind and doing them in the real world, unless you find someone who will be your partner and do those things with you consensually and sanely and safely. But if I'm walking down the street and I see a pretty woman and I have an errant thought about horrible, sexual, dirty things I would do to that woman, I am perfectly free to have those thoughts. There's no crime in having those thoughts. There's nothing bad about it. There will be no negative repercussions for me having that thought, unless I bring them unto myself. And I don't think that you should be guilty for having thoughts that make you happy. Now, there are exceptions to this, of course. If you're having constant thoughts about hurting people that you just can't turn off and become some kind of mania, again, you should probably seek some kind of help. But as a general rule, your fantasy life, whether in moments or daydreams or just quick flashes, is yours. It's all yours. It's no one else's. You don't have to share it with anyone else, and you don't have to apologize for it. I know some people in my real life who are turned on by things that by any outside observer would look like torture. And I don't necessarily mean physical torture, mental torture, emotional torture, and so on. And yet, these things, under the correct circumstances, are pleasurable for that person. They're cathartic. They're a release of stress, a release of tension, and in a way, also an expression of trust. If you can be, in real life, as kinky and as dirty as you like to be with the right person, that is probably the greatest gift you can find for yourself. If you can take the portions of your fantasy life and move them over into real life with someone who shares those interests with you, and it's safe. You can do it in the bedroom. You can do it in little ways in public, whatever. As long as it's safe, as long as it's sane, as long as it's consensual. That's probably the best thing that can happen. That doesn't happen for everybody, unfortunately. But in the absence of having someone you can do these things with, you, in your own mind, in your own imagination, are free to do as you choose. And you do not have to feel bad about it. You're not sick. You're not wrong. Short of you carrying things out into the real world that actually harm people, or do things to people that are against their will, you're free to do whatever you want in your own mind. Now, I know I'm kind of preaching on this a little bit, but for reasons that I can't really specify for the sake of giving too much away about myself or anything else, it has been my experience in the past where I have seen people and also been the recipient of attempts to shame for the sake of liking things that are off the beaten path. Now, I'm not going to say that every time I hear about someone's personal kink or their fetish or whatever else, that I might not find it reflexively weird or ridiculous. Because to my sensibilities, maybe it is. At the same time, again, if whatever they are up to, if whatever they like to do, meets the criteria of safe, sane, and consensual, I don't have any fundamental problem with it. That doesn't stop me from having, opinions about it. But that doesn't make the person necessarily bad or sick or wrong. Now, for example, a bit of an extreme example, I don't quite understand furries. I have some friends who I suppose would fall into the category of furries. They like dressing up as animals and playing around as animals, either socially or sexually, or they just like dressing up as animals. It runs the gamut. I don't understand it. I look at it, and I'm not turned on by the idea. It doesn't send any special feelings into my loins to think about participating in such an activity. So I can't help but think of it as a little weird and silly. However, at the core, again, that's their thing, and that's fine. As long as they're happy, as long as they're healthy, as long as nothing untoward is going on between people, that's fine. And so I guess the general message I'm trying to get across here, when it comes to BDSM, kinky stuff, anything that's off the beaten path, not everyone has the opportunity to carry out every fantasy they want in real life. In fact, some fantasies would not work in real life. Either they are, impossible, or, let's be honest, some people, myself included, have fantasies that, if carried out in real life, would probably put us in jail. But, again, as long as it is in your head, as long as it is not carried out into the real world, your imagination is your territory. We are not, at least to this point, in a situation where we can be prosecuted for thought crimes. The only person who can prosecute you for that in this day and age, I hope, would be yourself. And I would hope that as long as you're happy, as long as you are thinking things that make you feel good, you shouldn't prosecute yourself for that. You shouldn't hold yourself to account for liking things that maybe other people don't, or be ashamed of them. Again, everything within moderation and everything within reason. There's a lot of wiggle room here for bad thoughts versus healthy thoughts, etc. And if you do have some instigating event or trauma in your life from which these things come, certainly find help for those things. But, like the girl with the brush, who liked being spanked with a brush, just because the initiating event of that kink was inherently a negative experience, or meant to be one, just because you like it now is beside the point. Or that it was negative is beside the point. If you like it, it's fine. If it's in your head, it's fine. No one is hurt. There's nothing tangible about thoughts. So I guess without repeating myself for a 17th time, that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you have any thoughts on the same topic or along those lines, feel free to leave them in the comments. If there is something that you would like to see me speak on or give my opinions on or research on your behalf, again, leave it in the comments and I'll take a look. And as always, thank you for listening.